Howdy folks, I want to welcome you to the campfire, a place where we can just sit and tell a story or two and we can ponder on the unusual and mysterious things that occur out here in the wild. I'll tell you some of my stories and well, you can tell me some of yours. This is Clay Steele. Come join me around the campfire here beneath the stars. Grab a cup of coffee or a cold drink and let's talk about our stories. Can't wait. Well, good evening, everybody. Clay here. Glad y'all could show up. It's a good evening for storytelling. The weather's right and fire doesn't seem to matter. So come on and find a place to sit down here. Don't sit downwind. You know that's a rookie mistake. But get yourself something to drink and let's tell some stories. I've got a couple I'm going to try to remember. I don't know if you have any yet, but it'd sure be good if you could bring one or two to the table. That'd be nice. Well, we'll see as the night develops here. Well, this story that I'm thinking to tell you tonight happened, it wasn't that long ago. It was only a few years back. And it was in the North Woods, you know, sort of along the coastline, the Pacific Ocean coastline. And it had to do with this fella I met. It was actually kind of a gathering, and I met him there. And he told me this story in passing. Just kind of told me the highlights, but it kind of stuck with me. I'm kind of curious about it. I thought about it from time to time. So I'm going to pass it on to you tonight, and you can kind of mull it over and see what you think of it. And if you have any ideas what it was all about, why, let me know. I'll be smarter for the experience. Oh, what this guy told me was he lived out in the redwoods, built a nice home. He didn't have any neighbors right next door like city folk do. He was in the big tall trees and he was in kind of a hilly area and had a really nice flat spot built, cleared enough trees to put this beautiful home in. And there was a creek down below the front of the, well, I guess you'd call it the yard, but it was sort of the clearing where his driveway and garage and all those things were up by the house. So if you went down about 30 feet, he said, there was a creek and it ran by and on farther along into the woods. So that's sort of the layout of what he had done. He was really into this whole, you know, he believed in Bigfoot and the redwoods. He knew that it was partially a coastal type of animal, or at least the ones that he'd heard about and that he'd experienced run-ins with or signs that he'd seen. Not really sure what his experience was with them. This is the only story he told me, but he definitely was a believer. So in honor of that, he had commissioned this chainsaw carver. Perhaps you've seen him. So he had him carve this really realistic, he called him a woodsman. It was a Bigfoot, but for some reason he called him woodsman. So it was supposed to be life-size, so it had to be immense, 10 foot tall or so. And it was built out of a log, so it was tall and big and it was probably pretty nice looking. I never saw a picture of it or anything. But this guy had the funds, so I'm sure it was nice. Well, he had it set in the front yard there, sort of in a garden area, his driveway area, and that way he could look at it, and it'd probably be interesting first thing in the morning, look out your window or step out on your porch and look at a Bigfoot. But nonetheless, he knew it was there, and he did it. And so it was setting far enough out there so it kind of was above the creek, it could see down into the creek bed. He liked it, and that's what mattered. Well, one night, middle of the night type thing, the dogs his guard dogs, started just barking furiously. The lights come on, because he had a security system, so the lights came on, the motion sensors. But all the camera caught later on when he went to looking at it was just a blur. So he knew it was something that had turned the lights on, but it was just something big and blurry is all he could tell. And over the next couple of days, it happened 2 more times. And he noticed some tracks, some disturbance in the driveway. And he called them woodsman's tracks. He was pretty sure about what he was seeing. But it was never really closer than about 60 foot or so from, it was just kind of on the perimeter out there on the edge of on the edge of the lot where it dropped down into the creek. It just kind of wasn't too bothered by it, but, it was a couple times in a week. It kind of bothered him a little bit. But then kind of didn't happen for a while. It was just kind of quiet and back to natural woods that he always run with in that area, so he wasn't thinking about it much. And well, he went on vacation for a week. He and his wife and kids, and they up and went on vacation. So they boarded the dogs in town, and they knew they had a good alarm system, so they weren't really worried about break-ins. That's pretty rare, and with the modern alarm systems, why, generally speaking, you're probably pretty safe. They had perimeter alarms and lights and motion sensors and the whole shooting match. So everything was pretty quiet. And you can monitor these things nowadays. You can monitor them from, somewhere else. You can be on vacation, for instance, if you really wanted to do that, but you could. Well, along about the second night, why, the perimeter alarms go off. What happens in that case when the perimeter's broken is the lights will flip on in the house, pointing out, and then you'll have an audible warning, and it'll say something like, you probably heard these, it'll say something like, leave the property now, the cops are on the way, or we see you, or whatever you can imagine they might say. The idea is to scare off an intruder so that they think, well, you're aware of what's going on. They're out there, and so their surprise is gone. They need to get out of there, and that usually works. So it worked that night. A couple nights later, the alarm goes off again, just kind of briefly. And now he knows this because he gets a warning while he's on vacation. He gets a warning that his alarm has gone off, it's triggered. And he knows that nobody's got into the house because that would be a different level of alarm, so that's not an issue. But he kind of can't do anything from where he's at, and there's no need to call in the cops or the neighbors with guns because the house is safe. So then no more news or alarms or anything after that second time on about the fourth night. Nothing happened. It was quiet again, so he kind of was a little bit relaxed. So they got home on about the 8th day or so, and next morning he went out and got his dogs from the kennel, brought them back. Nobody'd been in their house. That was the important thing. And they couldn't see any big difference, and they got home late anyway. So the next morning went out and got his dogs and brought them back, and when he got them back to the house and let them out of the truck, why, they just started going crazy, and they were sniffing and running and barking and growling, and they were really not very happy. And that's when this man noticed that his statue was not where it was the last time he saw it, on the edge up there, that garden area. It was gone. So he went and got a gun, and he figured, I'm going to, go see if I can see it. So he let the dogs loose. They had their shock collars on, so, that's how you can control them, bring them back to you. So he went walking, and he could see that there was a big commotion off the side down to the creek. So that's where he started. And he went down into the creek bed and could see that, things had been tore up pretty good, and drag marks and all kinds of disturbance, basically. And the dogs are working their way up the creek. And so he goes up the creek bed. And they don't go too far, only a couple 100 feet up into the trees some more and some brush. And they can see at that point, even though it's been disturbed the whole way, now there is what's left of this statue. And it looks to be all chewed up and broke and defecated upon and just everything you can think of. It was just, it wasn't in good shape. It was tore up. Wasn't worth even trying to retrieve. So he left it there after kind of studying it for a bit, and figured that there was no more threat. So he called his dogs back in, and they went back to the house. And he carried on with being home from vacation, as you do. You know how that is. You have to open everything back up and start living again, and put the dogs in the kennel, and got to thinking about it. And the only thing I guess he could think is what he told me there that night that I met him and talked to him. He figured that for some reason that replica woodsman, as he called him, must have upset the real woodsman, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and they destroyed the thing. So for the first couple times that his alarm was going off, they had seen it, maybe accidentally, maybe just wandering by, and there it was, maybe looked up from the creek bed, and maybe they thought it was competition for them or so, if they're territorial. And up it came, and when they realized it was wooden, maybe they were angry. Maybe they thought he was trying to trick them or something. That's something I don't know. I'm not a big, I don't know a whole lot about this whole Bigfoot thing. I know there's a few people that have had a lot of contact, and they're the experts, and I'm certainly not. But I do have an opinion. I have a couple of them. And my opinion here is that that's probably the case, is it probably just upset them, and they decided to tear it up and show their dislike for that replica, that statue. So that's what happens sometimes. There's not an explanation for everything, folks. It's sort of a mystery. You just use that experience for maybe the next time something happens, and maybe you can put 2 or 3 experiences together and get an opinion. Kind of the way the world works, isn't it? Well, hey, it was really good talking with you tonight. This campfire has been a good one, and I'd like to hear somebody else's story if they got one. If not, I guess I'm just going to say good night, and I'll talk to y'all again at the next campfire.